come and work at existing growth companies in those communities. And then at the end of 2 years, if they want to start their own business, then they could have access to a seed fund and mentorship and learn the way I learned, by working with someone more experienced. How does it sound to you all? Good. Well, thank you. I mean, so again, full credit to Evelyn, because when she and I met, I was a pretty normal guy. And so then when I came back and was like, hey, I think I'm going to quit my job and start a nonprofit, trying to create thousands of jobs around the country, train hundreds of entrepreneurs. So she's a very good sport. How many of you all work at nonprofits, or government now? I mean, it's sort of, I'll say nonprofits explicitly. How many of you volunteer for a nonprofit? Now, you should just raise your hand to that one. That's like, are you a good person? Yes, I am. So I started this nonprofit by putting some of our savings into this new 501c3 I started. And then I called rich friends with this question: do you love America? And then the smart among them said, what does it mean if I say yes? And I said, at least $10,000. And then 12 of them said, I love America for $10,000. I was like, I thought you did. So we started with a couple $100,000 that grows to the millions. I run this organization for 7 years, helped create several thousand jobs in 15 cities around the country. We were honored by the Obama administration multiple times, so I got to bring Evelyn to meet the president. My in-laws were really excited about me that week. They were like, she did all right. Look at these pictures. But unfortunately, while I was traveling the country, I had this sinking feeling that things were getting better, not worse. How many of you are from New England or upstate New York like me? How about the Midwest? South? West Coast or Mountain West? Southwest? I was staggered by the gulf between regions, where if you fly between Michigan and Manhattan or St. Louis and San Francisco, you felt like you were crossing dimensions or decades or ways of life, and not just a few time zones. But I was still stunned when Donald Trump became our president in 2016. You remember that night well, I'm sure. How did you react that night?
Nausea.
Tears, like, oh, groan, like, oh, no. Evelyn and I reacted the same way. It was a real sense of, like, wow, that just happened. And to me, this was a very strong red flag that tens of millions of our fellow Americans decided to take a bet on the narcissist reality TV star as our president. And even if you were shocked and dismayed, we all have family members and friends and neighbors who were excited about the outcome. Now, if you were to turn on cable news that night, or really any night since then, why would you think that Donald Trump won? Why would you think that Donald Trump's our president today? Yeah, some people in these key states that went to Trump, yes?
Media.
People staying home.
Non-politician, racism, not Hillary Clinton.
Staying home. Voters staying home.
Turnout, emails, Facebook, FBI, electoral college.
Russia.
Businessman, Russia again. Angry. All of these things mixed together and said, this is why. But I'm a numbers guy, and so I went looking for an explanation in the numbers, and I found it. We automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs over the last number of years. And where were those jobs primarily based?
Midwest.
Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, Iowa, all the swing states that Donald Trump needed to win and did win. And you may know this in part because this happened in New Hampshire a bit earlier. You all lost over 12,000 manufacturing jobs in the northern part of the state. And when you go to those towns, you see, after the factory or plant or mill closed, then the shopping district closed, then people started to leave, the schools shrank, and that community has never recovered. I saw the exact same thing in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Missouri. And what happened to those jobs, unfortunately, is now shifting to other parts of the economy. How many of you have noticed stores closing around where you live here in New Hampshire? And why are those stores closing? Amazon, that's right. Amazon's soaking up $20 billion in business every year, closing 30% of our stores and malls. Most common job in the country is retail clerk. Average retail clerks, a 39-year-old woman, making between $8 and $10 an hour. When her store closes, what is her next move going to be? Stay at home, unemployment, unsure. How much did Amazon pay in taxes last year? Zero. That's the math. Concord, 20 billion out, 30% of your stores and malls closed forever, you get zero back. Now, we all see those types of changes at the grocery stores and the CVS, the fast food restaurant, but it's more pervasive throughout the economy. When you all call the customer service line of a big company and you get the bot or software, I'm sure you do the same thing I do, which is you pound 000, say, human, representative, human, until you get someone on the line, right? Raise your hand if that's what you do. Oh yeah, we all do that. The software is terrible. As soon as you hear it, you're like, please let this company still employ a human after I get through whatever tree you have. In 2 or 3 short years, the software is going to sound like this. Hey Andrew, how's it going? What can I do for you? It'll be fast, seamless, delightful, a little bit overly friendly. What is that going to mean for the 2.5 million Americans who work at call centers right now making $10 to $14 an hour?
Unemployment.
How many of you all know a truck driver here in New Hampshire? It's the most common job in 29 states. My friends in California are working on trucks that can drive themselves. They say they're 98% of the way there. A robot truck just transported 20 tons of butter from California to Pennsylvania with no human intervention just 2 weeks ago. Why did they choose 20 tons of butter for this? I have no idea. But if you Google robot butter truck, you'll see. And at the end was a giant stack of pancakes now. So, well, what is this going to mean for the 3.5 million truckers or the 7 million Americans who work in truck stops, motels, and diners that rely upon the truckers getting out and having a meal every day? You can think about our highway system as like a circulatory system, and the trucks are like blood cells. And they're carrying their cargo, yes, but they're also carrying economic vitality because that trucker has to get out and sleep and eat and shower and see a movie. 10% or almost 10% of the jobs in Nebraska support trucking. What will happen to those communities when the robot truck does not need to stop in Nebraska anymore? So these are the changes that I saw when I started going through the data in 2017. Trump wins, I look and I say, oh my gosh, we're in the midst of the greatest economic transformation in the history of our country, what experts are calling the fourth industrial revolution. When's the last time you heard a politician say fourth industrial revolution? Just now, 3 seconds ago. And I'm barely a politician. And Evelyn will tell you, she always thought I'd make a terrible politician because I'm quite bad at lying. You can ask, like, when I was going to propose to her, I was trying to surprise her, and I felt like it was like written all over my face. She knows what I'm going to say. She said yes. Hey, we got there. So we're going through this incredible economic transformation, and immigrants are being scapegoated. First years immigrants have next to nothing to do with. It's not like immigrants are going to drive these trucks. It's going to be machines and AI. It's starting to rip through the most common jobs in the economy beyond manufacturing. And so I went to our leaders in DC and I said, what are we going to do to help our people manage this transition? What do you think the folks in DC said to me when I said, what are we going to do?
Go away, be quiet.
Go away, what transition, be quiet. At another event, someone made this Scooby-Doo noise. It was like, oh, oh. So those were the responses I got. Not that Scooby-Doo noise, but the responses I got were, we can't talk about this, we should study this further, and we must educate and retrain all Americans for the jobs of the future. How many of you heard that from someone? Yeah, that's everywhere. Yeah, Joe Biden said that, it's true. So then I'm the numbers guy, so I said, hey, after the studies, you all want to guess how effective government-funded retraining programs were for the manufacturing workers who lost their jobs? It's at 3%, very low. I'm anchoring you low. It is low. It's 0 to 15%, their total failure. Half of the workers who lost their manufacturing jobs never worked again. Of that group, half filed for disability. You then saw surges in suicides and drug overdoses in those communities to the point that American life expectancy has now declined for the last 3 years in a row. You know the last time American life expectancy declined 3 years in a row?
Never.
The Spanish flu of 1918, that's right. You have to go back 100 years. It is highly unusual for life expectancy to ever decline in a developed country because you ordinarily get richer, stronger, healthier, and it just keeps on inching up. In the US, it's gone down and then down and then down again, almost unprecedented. That's a good question. I'll have to look that up. I don't think they're dying younger, though they do have some real social ills. Oh yeah, that's like population shrinkage. This is like actually like we followers, not leaders. And the only way we will do anything about it is if you were to create a wave in other parts of the country and bring that wave crashing down on our heads. He said this to me. And I said, challenge accepted. I will be back in 2 years with the wave. So now, most of you know this, I stand before you, fifth in the polls to be the Democratic nominee. We raised $16.5 million last quarter in increments of only $35 each, so my fans are almost as cheap as Bernie's. But there's no corporate PAC money. This is the wave that can rewrite the rules of the 21st century economy to work for us, to work for you, to work for your families, to work for our kids. You all are among the most powerful people in this country today. I don't know if you feel that, but I did the math. Do you know how many Californians each of you is worth?
1,000.
1,000. 1,000 Californians each. So how many of us are in this room today? I'm going to give a Trumpian estimate, about like 80 people in the room. So 80 people still would be 2 football stadiums full of Californians. That's the power that you have to do something the rest of America only dreams of, which is to overrun the place and then bring us in a new direction. That's why it's always such a thrill to campaign here, because of this power that you all have. So the question is, how are you going to use this power in 32 short days? What are we going to do with it? What is the vision to present to the rest of the country? If you were here today, at some point you heard there's a man running for president who wants to give everyone $1,000 a month. You remember hearing that? Raise your hand if that's. How many of you saw one of the TV ads? Let me try that. That's good, because we spent a lot of money on those ads. So if you hadn't, have to reorganize the advertising department. So I know the first time you heard about this freedom dividend of $1,000 a month, you thought, that's a gimmick, that's too good to be true, that will never happen. But this is not my idea, and it's not a new idea. Thomas Paine was for it at the founding of the country. He called it the citizen's dividend for all Americans. Martin Luther King fought for it in the 60s, and it is what he was fighting for when he was killed in 1968. I know this in part because I had the poor. It was so mainstream that 1,000 economists, including Milton Friedman, one of the fathers of modern economics, endorsed this plan in the 60s, and it passed the U.S. House of Representatives twice in 1971 under Richard Nixon. It was called the Family Assistance Plan. Would have guaranteed a certain level of income to all families. And then 11 years later, one state passed a dividend where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year. No questions asked. And what state is that? Alaska. And how does Alaska pay for it?
Oil.
And what is the oil of the 21st century? Data, technology, and oil. How many of you saw that study? How many of you got your data check in the mail last month? So if our data is now worth billions of dollars a year, who's getting the money? Facebook, Amazon, Google, Apple, the mega tech companies that are paying zero or near zero in taxes. Do you see how it's happening? We're getting depleted and sucked dry, and the biggest winners in this economy are paying virtually nothing back. We're looking at our kids and our families and our communities saying, why do things seem like they're heading in the wrong direction? How many of you are parents like me and Evelyn? If you're a parent at some point in the last number of years, you've felt like we're leaving our kids a more uncertain, unstable future than the lives that we've led. And the reason we feel that way is because it's true. It's not just climate change either. It's the fact that if you were born in the 1940s in this country, there was a 93% chance that you were going to be better off than your parents. That's the American dream. That's what brought my family here, Evelyn's family here. That's what we've all aspired to. If you were born in the 1990s in this country, you're down to a 50-50 shot, and it's declining fast. That is why we feel the way we do about our kids' future. Because by the numbers, it is eroding. This is one reason why Donald Trump won, is because people looked at the future and they did not feel positive and optimistic about it. They had this sinking feeling that so many of us have felt over the last number of years. So our vision, your power, is to rewrite the rules of this 21st century economy to work for us and our kids. And this $1,000 dividend that seems too good to be true is very, very easy to pay for as long as we get our tiny fair share of every Amazon sale, every Google search, every Facebook ad, every robot truck mile, every AI work unit. Amazon, this trillion-dollar tech company, is paying less in taxes than everyone here in this room. Whose fault is that? Is it their fault? No, it's their job to pay as little in taxes as possible. It's our fault. It's our government's fault. You have to be pretty asleep at the switch to say zero in tax for Amazon, like, thumbs up, acceptable. That is what you all have to change in 32 days. This is how we rewrite the rules. You take a tiny sliver of that value that's getting siphoned out of your community and put it back into your hands. Build a trickle-up economy from our people, families, and communities up. This will be the greatest expansion of Social Security benefits in generations. One of the reasons why it's going to be so powerful is that it's going to stay, well, where is the money going to go? Like, how would you spend it? How much of it would stay right here in New Hampshire?
80%.
Most all of it. Not all of it. You might get your own Netflix password. You might. But most of it would go to car repairs and daycare expenses and Little League signups and local nonprofits and religious organizations and Democratic Party dues. This is the way to rewrite the rules of the 21st century economy to actually reflect our goals, needs, and values in our communities. We're being told about how great, I'm not sure if things are that great. And again, you are right. You have record high corporate profits in this country. You know what else are at record highs? Stress, financial insecurity, student loan debt, mental illness, depression, suicides, drug overdoses. Again, if your corporate profits are going up and your life expectancy is going down, which do you listen to? We know which one DC is listening to. They can't even see people and wellness and life expectancy. They just see the dollar signs. Washington, D.C. today is the richest city in our country. What do they produce?
Lies.
Bad solutions.
Whatever they produce, business is very, very good. Donald Trump wanted to drain the swamp. I want to distribute the swamp. What I mean by that is, why are we spending all of this money employing hundreds of thousands of people in the most expensive region in our country? If we could move some of those jobs to New Hampshire or Ohio or Michigan, we would save billions of dollars because everything would be cheaper in those places. Put jobs someplace where people would be thrilled to have them. And I would argue that the decisions these agencies make would be better because they live someplace normal instead of in a DC bubble where they just look at each other all day. So this is how we make government work for us again. We have a cliff. Robot trucks will be great for both GDP and corporate profits. They're going to be very bad for a lot of Americans. So how would we measure our economic progress in a way that would get it right?
Education.
Health and life expectancy, yes.
Education.
Happiness, mental health, and freedom from substance abuse. Childhood success rates. Education, clean air and clean water. Sure. You know what? One thing I'm for too? Term limits. Like, then come home. It should not be to sort of crouch there and be like, ooh, I like this place. I should just try and stay here for as long as possible. Oh. Oh, it's an issue. Of course it's an issue. We look up and we're like, what the heck is going on in this place? I'm your president for 8 years and do as much as I can for the American people. I will leave that town and you will never hear from me again. So we have to measure the things that actually would tell us how we are doing. If we get this wrong, we're going to continue to be told how great things are while, frankly, things get worse underneath our feet. As your president, it will be my privilege to modernize our economic measures to clean air and clean water and mental health and childhood success rates and present them to you every year at the State of the Union. I'll be the first president to use a PowerPoint deck at the State of the Union. Birds, people taking care of ailing and aging loved ones, 0. Volunteers, activists, 0. Coaches, mentors, 0. Artists, 98% of the time, 0. Local journalists getting zeroed out. We put 2,000 local papers out of business. You know what functions much, much worse if you don't have local news? Democracy. How the heck can you expect citizens to vote on what's going on in their community if there's no local news source telling them what the heck is going on in the community and what their local officials are doing? Now, this list is a list of the things that we're meant to prize most highly and dearly. Our loved ones, our families, our community, our democracy. And we are allowing them to get zeroed out one by one. Because right now in America, everything revolves around the almighty dollar. If you have money on one side and people on the other, money wins, people lose. That's what we have to change together over this next, really, it's like a 1 month or so, that we have this historic opportunity to turn things around, to get in there and let people know that economic value and human value are not the same things. That if we allow ourselves to get suckered into thinking they are, it's going to be increasingly disastrous. What happened with the opiate epidemic? Purdue Pharma dispensed hundreds of thousands, even millions of OxyContin prescriptions saying it was a non-addictive wonder drug. There was one point when Ohio had more OxyContin and opiate prescriptions than it did human beings. Think about that. And our government turned a blind eye to this for years. And then eventually they fined Purdue Pharma $635 million, which sounds like a lot until you realize Purdue made $30 billion. They got the equivalent of a 2% fine. And we've been wrestling with the consequences. I know people here have lost people to the opiate epidemic ever since. This is what happens when drug companies run our government. And this is what you all have to change. We have to take back our government to actually work for us again and not the drug company.
Time for 2 more questions. We'll go sir in the vest right there. Mike, thank you.
There's a question in the back of the deficit, which I'll touch on in a minute, but let's see where he's going.
Hi, I'm Bo Peterson. I live here in Concord. I'm wondering about your environmental plans, and I think global warming is a huge threat to us. So could you elaborate a little bit on that?
How many of you are concerned about climate change?
Sure.
Yeah. Me too. It's existential threat 1A that's bearing down on us. And so here are the steps you have to take. And the fossil fuel companies are a bit like the drug companies where they've got the run of the place. So first, we have to zero out the subsidies that are heading to fossil fuel companies, it's tens of billions of dollars, and then move those subsidies to wind, renewable, solar energy. Number 2, we have to put a price on carbon emissions immediately. Because again, these companies only respond to dollars and cents. So if you make it's like, hey, you emit more, you pay more, then all of a sudden you'll see their behavior change. You take all that money and then you also use that to subsidize progress towards renewable energy sources. We have to build in climate change into our economic measurements. How much is climate change going to cost? Trillions and trillions of dollars. And unfortunately, thousands and thousands of lives. So if you build in those costs, then you realize that if someone's polluting, then it's actually contributing to this $1 trillion cost. And doing nothing is incredibly expensive and costly itself. One of the frustrations I have is when politicians talk about climate change as if it's something we can prevent. We're already there. The 4 last years have been the 4 warmest years. I was in Portsmouth and they have buildings that are flooding now more than they were. Shrimping businesses are shrinking because the water got warm. It's here. It's here now. So we need to invest billions of dollars in making our communities stronger, more resilient, more adaptive now, and not leave people on their own to fend for themselves when the storm surge comes, or the flood comes, or the fire comes, or these disasters that are becoming more and more frequent and powerful. The toughest challenge in this is that America is only responsible for 15% of global emissions. So even if we got everything right, the rest of the world would continue to emit at very high levels, and the Earth would continue to warm. What's happening in Africa is that the Chinese government is going to them and saying, hey, we've got a coal-burning power plant for you. What do you think? What does the African government say?
Yes.
Sure, I just want energy, cheap. I don't care if it's dirty. So what do we have to do to change that? We have to go to the same African government and say, don't take the coal burning power plant. Here are solar panels that we will subsidize to the point where they're a no-brainer for you. That's where we have to try and lead the world as quickly as possible. A lot of it right now stems from the fact that people feel like fighting climate change is too expensive. And again, that's what we have to disabuse people of. Because the most expensive thing we can do is just let it run over us.
Last one, guys. Good time for one more. Right in the front. Okay.
Sure.
Right back.
Cameraman.
I'm not sure whether they consider you qualified for the next debate stage, but we all consider you as qualified. Am I right, Concord?
Thanks, I appreciate it.
So you did this fantastic live streaming of answering questions like 8-10 hours once. I think that was fantastic. So in the event that you don't go to the debate stage, would you consider doing something similar to that, like live streaming, responding to the questions like, you know, Vice President Biden just said this. What's your response, Mr. Yang?
Well, thank you for the sentiment. We're thinking of how we would respond to not making the debate. And we'll have some kind of fun thing like what you're suggesting. The great thing now, though, is that we're in crunch time, where we raised $16.5 million last quarter. We're still growing, and we can now make our case directly to voters right here in New Hampshire and Iowa. We are the best campaign to take on and defeat Donald Trump in 2020. And I'll give you a couple of indicators. First, what's the number one criteria that Democratic primary voters have for the nominee? Beat Trump. That's right. One study came out right here in New Hampshire, one survey that said that 10% or more of Trump voters in New Hampshire would choose me over Donald Trump in the general. Another survey came out that said 18% of college Republicans would choose me over Trump in the general. So Democrats and progressives are looking for someone to beat Trump. I'm already stealing some of his base. And if you take the Dems and progressives, then add the independents and libertarians and the disaffected Trump voters, we win very cleanly. And I'm going to give you one very big data point that shows my relative strength against Trump. I am the only candidate in the field that he has not touched online, in part because he knows I'm better at the internet than he is. And one of his senior advisors was caught on film at a private event saying, if there's a candidate we're worried about, it's Andrew Yang.
Yep.
So they know. And now what we have to do is make that case to voters right here in New Hampshire that this is the campaign that can cut right to the heart of his support, because we are laser focused on solving the same problems that got him elected. Instead of treating him like the cause of all of our problems, we treat him like a symptom, and we have to cure the underlying disease. So thank you, Concord. Let's make history together in just 32 short days. And I do want to just address the gentleman's point about the deficit really quickly. I've run businesses and organizations. When you have a debt problem, you look at revenue and expenses. Does America have a revenue problem? Yes, because you have $1 billion companies paying zero. So if you change that, you can generate hundreds of billions very, very quickly with a big up arrow attached to it. When robot trucks are on the highways, how much tax revenue will we get right now?
Zero.
Zero, because it's going to be a big tech company that's benefiting and they don't pay taxes. So that's what we have to change as quickly as possible. But if you give us a slice of that, then you get your revenue up very, very quickly. Do we have an expense problem?
Yes.
Yes. And what are the expense problems? I would say perhaps the biggest, Mar-a-Lago is funny. I'd say one of the biggest sources of spending is the military-industrial complex. We're spending $700 billion a year, more than $1 trillion in Iraq, $6 trillion in the Middle East. Terrible cost in terms of the human toll for our men and women when they come home. What did we get out of that $6 trillion plus? So this is where we need to start channeling our resources more intelligently. We need to move that $700 billion towards things that will make us stronger, safer, more secure, protecting against things like climate change, because that's going to be enormous, strengthening our infrastructure, protecting ourselves against AI and increasing cybersecurity. These are some of the biggest true threats of today. If you buy an extra aircraft carrier, it does not do anything to protect you from climate change or hacking of your infrastructure. So we need to start spending smarter. And if we do that, then we'll actually influence our deficit because we'll get much higher return on the spending than we're getting now.
All right. Hey, let's give it up one more time. Andrew Yang. I'm going to do it right here. If you would like a photo with the next President of the United States, you've come to the right place. He's going to be right here. Line up down the center aisle if you can. A little bit of space. Well, getting physical, boxing out, good in basketball, not so good in political events. And please go to one of our staff near the exit at the table. Sign up for a shift to make calls or to knock on doors to spread the gospel. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.
Your husband's here again. I might want to. We can't decide who we want to go. So I came here.
I'll probably be.
Joe good. You guys want to knock doors or anything? I don't want to object to it.
Yeah. Go up again? Oh, wow.
So I don't live in New Hampshire. I live in Connecticut, but I do
Oh, yeah, that's hard. I told him I did. That's how I knew you were coming. I'm like, oh, yeah. And he said, I can go with Linda. I said, I saw you on Facebook.
Yeah.